You know, administering users is one of the most important tasks you're going to ever have to do. No, really, I'm serious. Think about it. As much as us administrators, we like to think of other tasks that we do as being the most important ones, at the end of the day, the resources we provide, the websites we develop, the fancy scripts and applications we design, they're really only a means of providing a service to and supporting our users. Now, without users, we don't have a job. And without a job, we don't get paid. And that's really the bottom line. Now, since we're dealing with users, it's inevitable that users are going to forget their passwords. They're going to lock out their own accounts, they're going to move from place to place, and generally keep us guys busy looking after them. So their access needs to be largely uninterrupted. So in this video, we're going to discuss the more general day-to-day user account issues that you'll come across as an Active Directory administrator and look at how we can deal with them. So firstly, let's take a look at how we can unlock a user account because people forget things like their passwords on a regular basis. Now, they could do themselves a favor and use a guessable password, like password, for example, and that'll help us out, and everyone else is going to remember it too. That'll save us some trouble. All right, well, that's really not a good idea. I am joking, by the way. That's a really, really bad idea. And in fact, by default, it's not going to work anyway because our domain policy is going to reject it because a password of password, well, it's kind of stupid. So we've told our users for years now that in order to maintain security, they have to conjure up a hard-to-guess password. The trouble is, since I'm a man, I'm a bit like an Apple iPad. I can't multitask. I can only do one thing at once. So occasionally I'm going to forget my password and I'll get locked out of my account. So let's first take a look at why we're going to be locking out users if they forget their password, or heaven forbid, if it's actually an attacker trying to random guess their password. So on our domain controller here, we're going to go and click Start. We'll come over here to our administrative tools, and we're first going to launch our Group Policy Management console. All right, well, let's expand this, and over on the left, we are going to expand our forest. Then we'll expand domains, our domain, and now let's right-click on our default domain policy, and we're going to choose the top option, Edit, and that's going to open up our Group Policy Management Editor. So over here on the left, under our computer configuration heading, we're going to expand policies. Then we'll expand Windows settings, security settings, account policies, and then we'll choose the account lockout policy. Now over here on the right-hand side of our console, you can see that we do have three options. Our first, account lockout duration, as you can see, is not defined. So if we want to use this policy, we'll first need to right-click on the policy, choose Properties, and then check this box. Now, if we do this, we're then able to set a time limit for this account to remain locked if it happens to become locked. Now, if you do decide to use this policy, then you must understand that you are automatically going to unlock a locked account after the time that you specify here. So if I choose to set this for, say, 5 minutes, and then along comes a user, let's say Jordan, and he forgets his password and he gets locked out. Well, he'll be able to try again in 5 minutes, since by enabling this policy and setting it to 5 minutes like we have here, this policy will automatically unlock his account after 5 minutes of time. So understand here that any setting from 1 or above is going to wait 1 or more minutes before the account is unlocked automatically. But if we set this to 0, though, that's going to require an administrator to manually unlock the account. Oh, and by the way, an account lockout will generate a security event of 644. So check your event logs for any 644 IDs, and you'll see whose accounts have been locked out. So should we turn this policy on? Well, it's going to save you some time unlocking accounts, as they're just going to unlock automatically after the time you set, but it's less likely that you're going to then take out the time to investigate why that account was locked in the first place. So turning this policy on isn't a bad idea by any means, especially if you've set, say, a reasonably high number, something like 15 to 30 minutes, as it's going to make any brute force attempt so much harder if there's a big delay between those valid attempts. All right, well, let's go and look at the next policy. The next policy is our account lockout threshold. And this policy setting determines the number of failed logon attempts that can occur before a user's locked out. Now, notice here that it is currently set to 0. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it's turned off. So as it stands right now, if we use these default settings, we won't lock users out if they forget their passwords and keep on trying to guess. We're just going to let them try. Now, that also means that attackers, they're free to try as well. So should we actually lock accounts if people forget their passwords? Yes, we should. In fact, this should be turned on by default in my opinion, and I'd suspect that you listening to this probably have turned this feature on anyway. So let's go and turn it on now. So we'll right click, choose properties. We'll set a value between 1 and 999 for the amount of failures before this account is locked. So setting it to the value of 0 like it is now means an account is never going to be locked out. In fact, it actually says that above, account will not lock out. So if we set this to anything other than 0, let's just say 1 for now, that message above is going to change. It's now going to tell us that the account will lock out after 1 invalid logon attempt. Now, of course, 1 is pretty low. It's easy to mistype a password and be locked out. So you really should set this to somewhere between, say, 3 and 5. That'd be my suggestion. But that decision will probably be part of your corporate security policy anyway. So personally, I'm going to go with 3. So we'll set it to that. Now, once an account is locked, there's 2 ways it can be unlocked. It can either be reset by an administrator manually or unlocked automatically once the time expires in the account lockout duration policy, as long as, of course, that it's been set to a value of 1 or higher. Now, as a side note, if a workstation has been locked by a password-protected screensaver or by using Control-Alt-Delete, then any failed password attempts are going to also be counted in that situation. Now, once we click OK, Group Policy is going to tell us that it's going to change the other policies as well, so that our account lockout duration and the next policy, which we'll get to right now, is going to be set to 30 minutes. So let's just ignore this for now. We'll click OK, and we'll see what this next policy is. All right, well, the final setting here is to reset our account lockout counter after a certain number of times, so a certain number of minutes. Now, this setting determines the number of minutes that must elapse after a failed logon attempt before our failed logon attempt counter is reset back to 0 bad logon attempts. So if we assume for a moment that all of these settings here, they're all in effect, we've got 30 minutes, 3 minutes, or 3 attempts, and 30 minutes. So what this means is this. Each user under normal circumstances will have a lockout counter value of 0, meaning they haven't forgotten their password, everything's normal, just as if they'd had no failed password attempts. So the next morning, a user, again, we'll use Jordan as our example, the next morning, Jordan comes along, he tries to log on, and he's forgotten his new special hard-to-guess password. So he tries to log on, and it fails. Well, his failed password counter is now 1, because he's had 1 failed password attempt. So he tries another password, and that's wrong. So his failed password counter is now 2. Now he tries a third password. Now, if he guesses correctly, he's able to log on, and his password counter is reset back to 0, essentially giving him 3 more shots the next time he chooses to log on. However, if he's wrong, and he gets his password wrong again, his account will be locked out as per our 3 strikes policy here. Now, that means that either he needs to ring me and ask me to unlock his account as the administrator, or he'll need to wait for how long? 30 minutes, and it'll reset automatically. So this third policy setting here is where we can define how long we're willing to wait before we automatically reset that account lockout counter. Now, obviously, since we enabled our second account lockout threshold policy here, this policy's now been given a value of 30 minutes, and it stands to reason that both our first policy up the top and our third one should be set to the same value. But this third one here can't be set lower than our account lockout duration. So half hour it is, but you can set it to what you like from 1 minute through to 99,999 minutes, which is somewhere around 69 days, if my memory serves me well. Okay, so let's now assume that an account is locked. In fact, let's not assume it, let's lock out an account. So what I'm going to do is, to simulate this, we'll go click Start. Let's think about this for a moment. Let's fire up our remote desktop connection. All right, now I'm going to connect to a Windows 7 machine that I've got in my lab here using the IP address of 10.32.0.120. So let's hit connect there, and we'll enter in the password for Jordan and hit enter. Okay, well, we've logged in just fine, so we can see that Jordan could log onto this machine and go about his day-to-day business. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just simply going to log him off. All right, and let's go and try again. So we'll fire up our remote desktop connection tool and we'll hit connect. Now this time we're deliberately going to get his password wrong. So I'm just going to enter in some garble here. That's certainly not his password. We'll click OK. All right, the logon attempt failed there. So let's do it again, another time. Let's click OK. All right, that's failed as well. Okay, let's try one more time. All right, and it appears, well, there you go. It appears that it was going to log on, but this time we're only getting to see the log on screen because it now informs us that Jordan's account has been locked. All right, so let's close down remote desktop connection, and we're going to go back to our domain controller. So let's go and fire up Active Directory users and computers, which of course we're going to find here in administrative tools. All right, now here we are inside our users container, and there's Jordan's account, his normal user account. Now, one bad point here is that you won't get any visual cue that an account has been locked like you do, say, above with this guest account, which we can see that it's been disabled. It's got this little arrow here. With a normal account that's been locked, well, as you can see, you get no visual cue. So, okay, well, let's right click on it anyway, and we're going to choose Properties. We're going to go to the Account tab here, and right in the middle here, we'll need to check this box here to unlock the account. Now, some of you might remember that in earlier versions of Windows, we'd need to come down into this section here, and we'd uncheck a box. Now, in this version of Windows 2008, we now need to check this box here in the middle of the screen. So, check the box, click OK, and Jordan now should be able to try and log on fine. Now, in the real world, this guy Jordan, he's forgotten his password, and that's why we're here now having to unlock it. So he's probably going to run into the same problem again. So we should probably reset his password as well. That way, he's going to have to enter in a new one. In fact, there is another way to do both of these things at once, both unlock his account and reset his password in one go. So we're going to go and have a look at that in a moment. But before we reset his password though, let's try firstly just to log on to his account to make sure that it really is unlocked. So let's go back to our remote desktop connection tool. We're going to hit connect. I'm going to enter in his password, his real one this time, and we'll click OK. And you should now just be able to log on fine. All right, and there we have it. Jordan's in and he's back to work. All right, so let's now log off this account. We don't really need it anymore. And let's go and see how we can reset his password. Well, since Jordan had forgotten his password and we had to unlock it, it's highly likely that he's going to forget it again. So we need to give him a new one. So to reset a user's password, we'll need to come back here into Active Directory users and computers. We'll right click on the user account in question and we'll choose Reset Password. Now, a dialog box is going to pop up, which requires you to enter in a new password twice, of course. So let's do that now. We'll enter it in again to confirm we typed it correctly. Now, you'll also note here that we also can elect to force Jordan to have to change his password that we're setting up on his account right now to something else when he first logs on. And we really do want to do that because this way it forces Jordan to take ownership and responsibility for this new account or for this reset account. Now, if we don't make him change the password, then technically he can come back and argue that we could access his account if something happens later on, such as his files have been accessed by somebody else or something goes wrong. So if we make him change the password to something only he knows, he's now responsible for the account, and if then something happens, he can't point the finger at us. So I'd leave that box checked. All right, now our last checkbox here is where we can also unlock his account if we need to. So by checking this box, we can both reset his password and unlock his account all in the one go. Right, we're going to click OK. And his password's been changed, and Jordan is now going to have to change it again the first time he logs on. All right, well, the next thing we're going to look at here as far as troubleshooting our user accounts goes is a disabled account. Now, when a user doesn't require access to their account for an extended period of time, it's a good security practice to disable their account so that it can't be compromised. So perhaps the user's going on vacation or they're working on a project that only requires a few weeks of work here and there. Now, if we opted to delete the account instead, we're going to lose all of the group memberships that the user belonged to. So in times where this user is definitely going to come back, disabling the account is the better option, as when an account is disabled, the groups that it's a member of, its security ID, all of the rights and permissions and so forth, they're all retained in your Active Directory, and it makes it easy just to simply re-enable that account later on. So whatever your reason for disabling a currently unused account, doing so is not only smart, it's also incredibly easy. We'll simply come back here into Active Directory Users and Computers. We'll locate the user's account that we want to disabled. Let's use Jordan again for our example. We're going to right-click and choose Disable Account. And that's it. You'll get a confirmation message telling you that this object has been disabled. Now, of course, we can also visually identify any disabled accounts by, let's just click off this account, by this little black downward pointing arrow icon that you can see that's shown over the user account icon, and you'll be able to see that if you have good eyesight. Now, to re-enable this user's account when he returns, we'll simply right-click on the disabled account, and now we've got an option here to enable the account. So we'll select that, and again, we'll get a confirmation message here informing us that this object has now been enabled. Now, like our user accounts, computer accounts, they can also be disabled. And again, like with our user accounts, any disabled computer account is going to prevent that computer from being able to log onto our domain. So to disable a computer account, let's go to our computers container, and we will right-click on one of these computer accounts. Let's use our account at the top here. We'll right-click. We'll choose to disable the account. Right, are we sure we want to do this? Because it's going to prevent users on this computer from logging on the domain. Yes, we do. So we'll click yes. All right, and our account's now disabled. And again, at the top here, let's just click away. You can see it's visually identifiable as disabled using that same black arrow icon we saw with our user accounts. So to re-enable this computer account, again, we'll right-click. We're going to choose Enable Account, and we're done. So disabling user accounts and computer accounts is obviously useful because it will prevent those things from logging onto our domain. And of course, we then have the ability to reactivate these accounts at a later date, something we certainly do not have if we choose to delete them. But of course, there will be situations that arise that an account is no longer required. For example, if an employee leaves the company. Well, if that's the case, then their account should go the way of the dodo and be deleted. So once an account is deleted, it's gone forever. So make sure that you really want to do that, as once you delete a user account, the groups that it's a member of, its security ID, all of the rights and permissions, they're also removed from your Active Directory. So to delete a user account or a computer account, or even a group for that matter, open up Active Directory Users and Computers again, locate the object that you want to delete. Let's just go with our computer object here. We're going to right-click the object and choose Delete. Now you will get this confirmation message here asking, are you sure you want to delete this object? Now I'm going to click No here. But obviously, to actually delete the account, obviously we just click Yes. Now do take note that if you delete a user account and then you decide to go and recreate that user account by creating a new user account with the same name, then the new one is not going to inherit all of the security IDs and the rights and the permissions and the group memberships of the old account. So with the exception of the security ID, which is unique, you're going to have to manually recreate any of those old settings. Now, you might also come into a situation where renaming a user account is going to be something you need to do. For example, users, they can get married and change their name, or they could just simply change their name. Or perhaps the person's left the company and you'd like their replacement to take over their account, including all of their permissions and group memberships. So rather than recreating all of that information from scratch, it's just a simple task to rename the account. So of course we'll do this in this console in Active Directory Users and Computers. We will need to locate the account that we want to rename. So let's use Jordan. We're going to right click on it and choose Rename. So let's just change Jordan's name to Geordie and we'll hit enter, and that's going to pop up this Rename User dialog box. And you might wonder why. it's just popped up because didn't I just rename the account? Well, yeah, I did. But the reason that this dialog box appears is that when you rename the user, it only renames the name that you actually see in Active Directory users and computers. So far, we've not changed their user principal name or their pre-Windows 2000 logon names, which are, in themselves, important attributes. So this window appears, allowing us to change those details, as well as other things like their first name and their last name as well, if you like. Now, once you've made your changes here, let's just change this to mimic his name of Geordie. All right, looks good. Once we've made those changes, we'll click OK. And we're done, and the user can now log in with their brand new name, which ought to make them happy. So in this video, we've taken a look at some of the common troubleshooting steps that you can take when you're working with user accounts. Look, the reality is people forget their passwords, people leave the company, new people take their place. So until robots come back in time from the future and take care of our users for us, we're still going to have a job looking after them, at least for the foreseeable future. So we hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'd like to thank you for watching.